Welcome to another edition of the All Around Joe podcast with Joe Bauer and Joe Ward. What's up, Joe Ward?
What's up? It's good to see you again.
Yeah, I was just teasing Joe before we hopped on the call here about how it looks like he's promoting Starbucks and Progenics.
Gotta make sure that sleeve is pointed in the right direction the whole time. There we go.
The question is, do you have Progenics in your coffee right now?
I don't actually.
But
I had a pretty Progenics heavy breakfast yesterday. Me and my partner Mary Rose, we've been shoving down those hot cakes that they sell lately. They're just so good. If you've never tried them, this is a nice little quick advertisement. Progenics hot cakes. They are so good.
I know
we got like a tiny waffle maker.
Yeah.
And we've just been tossing that in with a little bit of coffee grounds and a little bit of PB Smash.
Really?
It's been good. Oh, yeah, it's been good.
Wow, I'll have to give that a shot.
We've been getting crazy.
That does sound good. I mean, my favorite coffee is coffee with half a scoop of Progenics Smash in it. So
I'm going to have to try that.
You haven't tried that?
Uh-uh.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's the best. It is wonderful. I don't know how people live their life without that.
I don't know, just something about like peanut butter in my coffee. I don't know if I can handle that.
You know, yeah, it sounds.
It's not a common mix.
No, it sounds weird, but it's like once you try it, you will not go back. So it's like I put PB Smash in my coffee. I put PB Smash with my in my green shake. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful thing. So highly recommend people try it.
Noted.
It's the best one. But yeah, guys, just so you have an idea, I just want to have Joe back on the podcast here because Joe and I always have fun conversations that it would be interesting for other people to listen to. I mean, Joe's been, how long have you been a CrossFit coach now, Joe?
Since 2015. So
okay.
Since 2015, what is that? Almost 2 years or so?
2 years.
Going on 3.
Yeah, going on 3 years, quite a bit of time. And Joe's just like a really interesting thinker. So it's always fun to hear about his thought process. And he recently moved from being an intern / coach at our CrossFit gym at Stoneway CrossFit all the way down to California. So
it's not that far down. I only went like halfway down the West Coast because I'm in the northern half of California right now. So It's not too far.
No, and I'm actually headed down there in that direction tonight. So
that's right.
Yeah, on the move. So we'll see how that goes. Although I hear that there's some snow that we're gonna hit in like Oregon / Northern California area.
That's probably true, but as soon as you get past Shasta, you'll be fine. You won't see snow ever again.
Right. It's all good. It's all good. So I just had a couple of topics for us to talk about today, but we'll see where this conversation goes. And if you see me looking over to the side, that's because I've got my iPad over there with all my notes. Yep, I don't have a Starbucks coffee or Progenics, unfortunately, but that's all right.
I don't have an iPad either.
You can hold that one up. So just, as a general topic starter is any interesting breakthroughs or insights in your training lately?
Interesting insights or breakthroughs in my training. Actually, I would say probably the biggest thing is, I think I mentioned this to you a while back, but it was actually this past Saturday. I spent my day at the Aromas Ranch over here. So it was really, really cool to kind of see that whole spiel, that whole area. It kind of feels like a museum at this point, in all honesty.
Does it?
Yeah, it's weird. Like it's just super dusty, super dirty, but it's great. Super historic. But while I was there, I did a new certification through CrossFit on flexibility.
Okay.
And that actually had a huge impact on just the way I think of warming up and joint rotations and dynamic stretching versus static. I think you and I have obviously talked about that a lot. A lot of folks kind of fall in love with static stretching. But dynamic is a lot more like the hot button topic right now, obviously. But it was really, really cool. So a lot of the stuff that we focused on was like, what exercises or what can people do, what can coaches do for their athletes to get the most bang for their buck, because
Okay.
obviously people are looking for a wider range of motion in CrossFit, whether they're a master's athlete or they're a brand new athlete. But we fall in love with the idea of if we sit in a lunge for an hour, we're going to open up those hips when that's not the case.
Right.
And so it was really, really cool. And that's actually probably the biggest thing I've implemented into my training right now, is simply looking at what are some areas that I could definitely gain more range of motion in,
Mm-hmm.
and how can I use those new tactics I learned there, whether it's isometric training or PNF. I don't remember what PNF stands for. It's something long and scientific, but it's the whole idea of when you hold a stretch and then you contract the opposite muscle, and then after 10 seconds of contracting that opposite muscle, you're able to fall a good like 4 to 5 inches further into a stretch. And that's just taking advantage of our central nervous system, basically tricking it into
Sure.
opening up our hips and our joints and stuff. And so it's been a weird, probably the past week since I've been back, just like figuring that out. How do I warm up my joints more intentionally? And the way you could feel it, like if you do an air squat without doing any warming up or any joint rotations at all, then all of a sudden, even if I'm doing stuff with like my ankle, I'm just like doing little ankle circles beforehand, doing some knee circles, doing some hip openers. Like even if you just spend like 10 reps on everything, the air squat feels like night and day.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we don't do that as often as we should.
Sure.
It's crazy. And so it's been huge. I think that's been the biggest thing, is we don't realize how the small things have a compounding effect long term. Even if we just do ankle circles every day for the
Right.
next 30 days, it's kind of like compounding interest. All of a sudden your ankles are so much more loose
Yeah.
every time you go into train, every time you go into a front squat or a back squat. Little small things like that, kind of
Yeah.
like
Did they talk at all about like hypermobility, like the idea of you being better at a back squat if if your range of motion stops right at the appropriate time rather than if it goes all the way through?
Yeah, and so one of the biggest things that popped up in that conversation the whole day was whole idea of being flexible and having the range of motion that's enough
Mm-hmm.
for CrossFit.
Okay.
If you can get into a proper air squat without hyperextending or overextending your spine, I'm sure we've seen people that do the butt wink,
Yep.
or they actually called it the pooping dog.
Really?
And I was like, that's a great one to use as a coach.
You're doing the
When,
pooping dog today.
when you're going way too low and that butt's on the ground. But it's really good in terms of like, no, because range of motion beyond what's needed for our sport is kind of can be seen as just trying to be a contortionist. Like you
Sure.
don't have to be able to do the splits to be able to be effective in the long term, to push off the nursing home in the long term, to do an overhead squat in the long term.
Right.
So it's a matter of just how do you get people flexible enough
Mm-hmm.
versus the exotic stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure. And yeah, I mean, the reason I ask is there's something to be said about like having the appropriate range of motion.
Yeah.
And if you actually have more range of motion than you
You're at
need,
a higher risk for injury usually, actually.
yeah, and not only that, your performance level usually dips because
Mm-hmm.
a good example is some of the best or fastest marathon runners in the world.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask them to bend over and stretch their hamstrings, they have zero range of motion.
Yeah.
But the thing is, they don't have to have a lot of flexibility in their hamstrings. And in fact, they
To
don't
do
because,
what they're doing there. Yeah.
yeah, if you think of just like picking up your knees over and
Yep.
over again for a couple of hours,
Yep.
having that limited range of motion actually gives you a little stretch reflex at that position,
Yeah.
so you're getting an
Yeah. No, I definitely
extra
thought
boost.
super interesting just in terms of that whole idea, because we see people that can do the splits, we see people that can do incredible back bends and stuff, but a lot of it's like, what do you need just to be functional
Right.
and hit these movements safely? Because I think one of the biggest things I've even seen at the gym that I'm currently coaching up here is a lot of folks are super flexible, and they all kind of do the hyperextension in the squat, and they all kind of do the
Huh.
little pooping dog. And so I'm always going to tell people like, stop. I want you to squat less and stay tight more,
Right.
because you lose all that tension is gone when you get all the way down there and stuff. And so I think one of the funniest things that they had brought up at the seminar was apparently there's a video. I don't know if you've seen it. It went viral this past month about a girl that was doing a split jerk, and she was so flexible that when she went for her split jerk, she actually fell into the splits.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
like
did.
kind of the whole idea of like, we don't need to work on her mobility as much as
No.
you'd think.
I'm pretty
Because
sure that
especially
was at CrossFit Industrious too.
was it really?
I think so.
I
Yeah.
didn't see it. We just talked about it, and I was like, that just blows my mind, but it makes sense in terms of like for the stuff that we're doing specifically in CrossFit, just being functional enough.
Yep.
If the body has a little over, or we're beyond that range of what we need, there's a higher risk for our body to fall into that.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what that would feel like, going for a split jerk and ending up on the floor.
Oh man, that was pretty
And
crazy. Yeah. I'll try and put that in the show notes at allaroundjoe.com/112 if people want
yeah,
to
that'd
go
be
and
great.
take a look at that. Yeah, because it was interesting. I remember watching it and being like, why are you showing me this video? And then going like, oh crap. Like my body would break if that happened, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. So it's a counterintuitive way of thinking of mobility. How do
Yeah.
we have the range of motion that's deemed enough for the movements that we do, enough for the functional fitness that transfers over to everyday life without increasing risk of injury for that exotic factor of, hey, I can do the
Yeah.
splits. Or yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, something interesting that I've kind of found in my training that I can share with people is that the idea of over breathing actually. And I don't remember if we've talked about this or not, but I'm taking the newest Wim Hof training course right now, and
Okay.
there's a whole section in endurance on it and how to breathe for endurance and basically get more oxygen to your cells as you're working. And the idea behind it is like, let's say that you're on the air bike and you're cranking, and we usually don't think about breathing anything any more than just like, all right, my body needs oxygen, so I'm breathing at the rate at which it is asking me to breathe, right?
Yeah.
But what you can do, and what I've found to be really beneficial, is if you actually think about over breathing, so breathing at a faster rate than what you think than what your body is asking you to do.
Interesting.
Just a little bit.
Huh.
And it's interesting because what I found is that I feel less taxed.
Less exhausted. And
Less
you're
exhausted,
probably
yeah.
probably able to keep going at a higher pace for a little bit longer too.
It's weird. Yeah. So I recommend giving that a shot for anybody that's looking to feel a little bit better on, and it works on, the air bike or running or, pretty much anything that you can. If you can get yourself to over breathe, then it feels weird at first though. It feels like, wow, I'm having to work a little bit extra, but it feels like less work to actually breathe more than it does to have to crank on that bike a little bit more. So
yeah, because you're getting a lot more oxygen in.
Yep. Yeah,
That's
it's cool.
great.
And getting more oxygen is key.
Yeah.
So good stuff. And then also, as it relates to the air bike, for anybody that wants to get better at that, I've noticed that, and I actually overheard Cody Anderson at a recent competition talking about this, so I stole it from him. And he was saying that if you have an air bike workout that you're doing, the key is to get your RPMs up as fast as you can. So to sprint to the point where you have a semi-sustainable for, like, let's say 10 seconds or, as long as you can. But for example, let's say like if I max out my RPMs on the bike, I can get up to like 105, right? So if I'm going to have to do 15 calories on the bike, if I crank up really hard, really fast at the start up to 100 or more, then I can coast to 15 calories. And I don't know about you, but the air bike has always been my arch nemesis, where it's like,
Oh, I
holy
agree.
smokes,
I
it
agree.
feels like
It
I'm on
always,
here forever.
yeah, no,
And
it's the worst.
and then you see, guys like Rasmus Anderson just did 50 calories in like 19 seconds, and you're like,
Yeah.
how in the heck did that just happen? And it is way easier if you give a little bit more effort, spike your RPMs early, and then let
Uh-huh.
them cruise on out. So give that a shot if
Interesting. I'm
you're
gonna have
listening, and
to.
try it.
Yeah,
It
it's funny
makes
actually.
life easier.
We had an assault bike workout at my gym last week, and it was a great chipper, but the buy-in was a 90 calories on the assault bike.
Ooh,
And so on average, most of our athletes were able to do that between like 8 to 12, 13 minutes or so. But I think one of our fastest athletes that we even saw, he was able to crank out, like, he's a big guy too. He was able to crank out 90 calories in like 4:05 flat. And
right.
like for us, we were like,
Yeah.
so I can't even imagine the whole idea of like if he was able to spike it up higher sooner, how much quicker would he have been able to do that too?
Yeah, and I've seen some good athletes recently at competitions that if they have a large number of calories like that,
Hmm.
they'll spike it up, right? Let's say that they'll
Yeah,
spike it up for like 20 or 30
yeah,
calories, then they'll relax for a while, and then they'll
uh-huh.
spike it up again after they've recovered, and they'll go through this cycle of up and down in the RPMs and
Interesting.
crushing it essentially. I
Huh.
mean, because you have to ask yourself the question, if you have to do 90, is it better to just hold it at your max pace, which maybe is like, I don't know, 70 or something like that? Or is it better to pop up to 100, for 20 calories,
Yeah,
cruise down for 30 seconds, pop up to 100 again, right? Like think of it as an
yeah,
interval.
yeah,
So maybe you're gaming the system a little bit that way. I don't know.
yeah.
Something to think about. But
Something to think about.
another thing I want to talk with you about today is what you think about the CrossFit decision to go from 6-person teams to 4-person teams, and have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, yeah. No, I have actually thought about that. I was actually listening to, I don't know if you listened to the podcast by Misfit Athletics, but they actually had a podcast on this announcement as well. I think it was earlier this week, and they brought up a point that I completely just it resonated with me in terms of bringing it down from 6 to 4. I think is going to revitalize the teams in gyms throughout the entire country, throughout the entire world, just because I feel like 4 people is so much more enticing than 6.
Mm-hmm.
There's always like, whether or not people want to admit it or not, I feel like every team has always had like that third person being like a weak link. And like you know what I mean? Like if you have one person, like whether it's a male or female, and they're not as up to par with the other 2 on the team, they got a nice little way to like coast to regionals or coast to the games.
Yeah.
But at the same time, for those that are super competitive, I think if you're able to it's so much easier to find one other male or female at your athletic ability and being able to crush it, because it will feel more like 2 partners
Mm-hmm.
in a workout versus having to navigate 3. I just think there's going to be a lot more excitement around that. I mean, I can think of so many gyms that if you just take the top 2 men, top 2 females at every gym,
Yeah.
like there's just a lot more potential there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you in that there's a couple of things, right? It makes it more interesting because of
Mm-hmm.
like the partner thing. It's much easier to be like, hey, Joe, you and I are workout partners. We work out all the time together. And that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense that, we're going to be the top 2 guys and go
Mm-hmm.
and do that and figure out the top 2 females as well. And it's easier, like you said, to have that training camaraderie in that
Yeah.
situation. At the same time, though, I feel like it's going to also make it that much harder because the scores are going to be that much more important,
Mm-hmm.
you know? if
Yeah.
you had, like you said, that third person, you know, it's hard to find 3 good guys and 3 good girls,
Uh-huh.
put them together on a team, and you can, if you can do that, then you could always play the numbers and be like, well, I need, you know, these particular scores, and it's going to slide
Yeah.
me in because you just have that, you know, average of 6 rather than average of
Yeah.
4. So it becomes down to like, all right, if I want to get a team into regionals, I'm going to have a couple of guys that are in the, you know, we could probably do the math on it, but, you know, top 100, and a couple of
Yeah.
girls that are in the top 100, and that will probably slide you in.
Yeah.
But before that, it was like, I knew teams that had people that were, you know, in the 200 to 300 ranking in their region, and they were, you know, that third person. And you're like, really? How in the world did that happen? It just doesn't seem like it makes
Yeah. Yeah.
sense. Or like you get to the regionals and you see people that are having trouble with doing muscle ups, for example. You
Yeah.
know, it's like you get to that place. I don't care if you're on a team or not. You should be good at everything.
Yeah.
And just the people that make it through are the ones that are exceptional at everything. You know.
Yeah, that's the thing I was thinking too, especially with it being just basically two pairs now. I think the standards in terms of like how strong enough do you have to be? What skills do you have to have mastered down? Like you just said, especially if you're not able to do bar muscle ups or ring muscle ups and you're going to regionals. I feel like the standard of athlete now to advance is going to be so much higher. Like this just raises the bar
Yep.
because when you put it to just rely on 2 partner pairs, I feel like not only do you can't really hide as much,
Yep.
like you can't hide your weaknesses as much, but also I feel like the competition level is just going to skyrocket.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be so much higher in
Yeah.
terms of just thinking, because you got to think about it too, from whether it was Dave Castro or just everyone else at the games that did all the programming. Like I feel like they're going to be able to do a lot more raw CrossFit stuff without having to navigate the logistics of 2 more people on every single team on the floor.
Yep, that was going to be my next statement
Yeah.
as well. Is like you know, having programming for, you know, any coach that has the program on a Saturday class knows that, or your team workout class knows that how much harder it is each person that you add into that programming. So the difference between
Mm-hmm.
programming for, in this case, there will be like probably 2-person programs, right? 2-person
Yep.
program is so much easier than a 3-person
So much easier.
or a 4-person. And 4-person is way easier than, you know, a 6-person.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I'm with you. The programming should become much more interesting. Hopefully we'll see things that people can do together that aren't just like the freaking worm, because the worm just drives me nuts.
I think the worm was a great tool and they were able to make it work, and it definitely challenged folks, but it didn't maximize the athletic potential of these athletes the best. I don't think it showcased their athletic potential to the best. And that's what I'm thinking too, especially when you have programming for just 2 pairs now. Like, I don't know. I just feel like it's going to be the competition is just going to be elevated so much higher.
Yep.
And when you think about that, you're going to have to be so much stronger. You're not going to be able to hide any weaknesses at all.
Mm-mm.
And for these partner workouts, is essentially what they are. If you think about when you watch regionals or even the CrossFit Games team series, for a lot of the workouts, take the worm out of it, there's a lot of individual rest.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you're that's going to be cut for sure in terms of either 2 people working at a time, and then you only have that other pair that's currently resting. I feel like it's going to cut the amount of time that they normally rest in workouts by at least a third, if not half.
Sure.
So the intensity I think it's going to go up a lot.
Right. So let me ask you this then. Something that I've kind of been playing with in my head and thought would be interesting is having to make teams declare their team before the open.
Mm.
And I think this is like, I have people it's a controversial topic in our gym, because it's like, to me though, if I'm going to, you could have, you know, 5 different people contribute to the same team and then you send, your top 4, or even in this case, you have the males and the females, right? So there's 2 different sides. So 5 different people contribute, and then you send 2 people out of those 5.
Yeah.
And then from then you have your team and your alternate. And it's like, I don't know. I think it would be really interesting if they had you declare your team before.
Yeah.
Okay. And then they had team workouts in the open.
Ah.
Yeah.
Because
then the open would get more interesting too.
Oh, for sure. It would get a lot more interesting.
Yeah. Logistically, it would be harder potentially for CrossFit.
Yeah. I think that's what they're trying to get away from, is they're trying to simplify, especially as the number of participants across the world continues to grow, which I'm sure we'll go into one of the things you're going to bring up in terms of how they changed a couple of the regions.
Sure. Yeah.
But like, it's just the way it's continuing to grow. I'm sure they all want to simplify rather than continue to overcomplicate.
Yeah, and I guess it comes down to like, is it simpler to have a workout set up like that, or is it simpler to have people that do go into the regional as like, oh, maybe I'll go team or maybe I'll go individual, and then having to sort that out afterwards,
Yeah.
I don't know, but I always thought it would be fun because I like the team component of it. Like my favorite workouts during the week are Saturdays when we program team workouts, and we throw down together rather than having to do, obviously you need to be an individual at times in order to get better at certain things. Yeah. But I don't know if maybe it just comes back to my team sport history. But
well, I mean, I think also if you're able to declare ahead of time, there's a commitment component that allows people to not be so, I don't know, flexible is not the right word, but people are able to be a lot easier on themselves, where it's like, if I don't have to declare I'm on the team until I know that I'm at this point, it's easy to back out still, or it's easy to have excuses. And so it's like from a team lead perspective, I would want people to declare from the beginning and commit all the way through. That way they don't get to slack off throughout the entire season.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm thinking about it from that aspect. Yeah, that's how I would want to construct a team, rather than construct a team of about 4 or 5 maybes.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you want to have the 4 or 5 maybes like 6 months out, and then have some sort of in-house competition, because you get this interesting, variables when you sit down with your potential team or people that want to be on it, and then you're like, all right, bust your ass and then do good in the open. And then the next question is, do you take the people that do the best in the open, or do you take the people that would do the best at regionals? And that becomes a whole nother.
100%. I agree with you. I'd be like also thinking about, do I take the people with the best scores? Do I take the people that are actually serious about it?
Right. Yeah.
because that's what I'm thinking about. From like, you might have someone in your gym that got like the best scores in the open, but they just happen to be naturally gifted and have a terrible team attitude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a real thing, because like,
oh yeah.
Yeah. Do you take if someone's training and they don't really train with the rest of the group and all whatnot, and then they actually contribute, but they don't do well enough to get to regionals as an individual.
Yeah.
And they're probably going to be pissed because they're not, being considered for the team. But
and you also have those people that are going die hard for regionals as an individual, and then when they don't perform up to their own standards, try to hop on a team.
Right.
So it's like there's a lot of interesting team issues there.
It gets shifty. And that's why, as somebody that, has to, I guess, make everyone happy or try to, that's why I think it would be easier if you had to declare a team going into the competition, and the start of the competition is the open. So if you're like, hey, these are the 4 people, and then you have, maybe you get an option for selecting an alternate or something like that, but you can't go out and above and beyond just in case someone gets injured.
Yeah.
And see what happens.
I think that'd be great. Let's go talk to Dave.
Yeah. So if Dave Castro, if you're listening, let's consider that. What do you say? Yeah, so you mentioned earlier about how they're combining some of the regions. I thought that was interesting, giving some more
Yeah.
slots to different areas, different regions that will get to the games. I haven't heard anything else about that though. Like something that I was
Really?
interested in. Well, have you, as far as like how they're going to set that up?
Yeah, at least I don't know if it's confirmed, but what I had heard was obviously they're opening a lot more spots internationally, especially
Right.
because the international participation has just been skyrocketing, especially in Latin America. And from what I heard, they're splitting the meridian into two different regions because rather than just calling the meridian all of Europe,
Yeah.
they decided they couldn't just do a whole continent as one
Right.
region because of how many athletes are getting from that area. So I think that's going to be split into two.
Hmm.
And then from what I heard, the biggest thing that was kind of shaking me up, and again, feel free to look this up, but that they're going to combine California
Hmm.
with Northwest
Hmm.
and Canada West.
Yep. Yep.
And for me, hearing that kind of blew my mind. Obviously, I don't know what the numbers look like throughout the rest of the country, but I would have felt like the West Coast is the last three regions you wanted to combine because there's always been so many athletes, even just in California alone,
Hmm.
that I know a lot of folks that were upset when they combined Southern California and Northern California. Now
Yeah.
you're taking the entire state of California, mixing it with the Pacific Northwest region and Canada West.
Hmm.
What?
Yeah, and something that I'm curious about as well, is how they've had it in the past is they combine these regions, right, for the regional, but
Yeah.
still as the open was the requirement for the open, they weren't combined, so they still took 15 teams and 15 people from, let's say, the Northwest and
Hmm.
15 from Canada West. And
Yeah.
then you went to the super regional, and then they took 5 people and 5 teams from the regional, but you didn't have to compete with them to get into the regional, if that makes
Ah.
sense. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm wondering if that's going to change or not, or if it's just going to be like free for all, there's going to be
Right. Yeah.
there's 45 spots or however many they're going to offer, and they're just like, well, if all of those people come from Canada or from California,
Yeah.
who cares? We got the best ones.
Yeah, I
So
don't know. It sounded kind of obviously. It sounds like there's still a lot to be announced. Especially, it sounds like Dave Castro is going to have some new announcements for the open season as well. But even just hearing that, like I said, I know a lot of folks here, especially in the Northern California area, that were, they made it to regionals when it was split with Southern California and Northern California, and they've been fighting to get back to California regionals since they combined it because you got everyone from Southern California now in the same region. And so now with this, I'm like, I haven't talked to a lot of folks over in our area yet, but I'm sure it just makes it so much harder,
mhm.
especially if you've been clawing your way back in. Then all of a
Yeah.
sudden you realize that the competition's also the entire Western hemisphere of our continent. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
It makes it interesting, but we'll
it does. I don't
we'll
know.
see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just like to figure out like what were the numbers looking like across all the other regions in the United States that they decided to combine all of these on the West. Because I just know the West is it's so heavily populated with CrossFit athletes. It's so densely populated with competitive athletes. I mean, we've all heard of the athletes that have been not accused, but people have questioned whether or not they moved out of the western part of the United States to move to an easier region. But just imagine what that would look like now, with
Mhm.
how hard this region is becoming. Yeah, I'll move over to Ohio, or actually, no, not Ohio. That's where Scott Panchik and all them are. So I don't want
Yeah.
to go to the central region, but I'll go somewhere else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like every region is just, it's all getting harder. It's all
It
getting
is. It
harder,
is.
so like gaming is going to be harder and harder to do.
Yeah.
But I don't know. You just got
At this
to
point, it's like let's move to Latin America.
yeah. Well, didn't they say that they're only going to get like one game spot or something?
No, I think they're opening it up to like they have like a whole Latin American region now, and so I think
Well,
it's going to be like 2 or 3. It's not going
Well,
to be one.
they said that they were opening it up because they had the absolute most CrossFitters in that region, but that they were the worst region. So that they were, because of that, they're getting less spots to the games, even
So
though
we would do Latin America a favor then, you're saying, if we moved to Latin America, coached there, competed there,
there you
brought
go.
the standard up, bring everyone up.
Yep. We should do it. Figure out where you
I'll
want to
look
go.
into it.
Let's do it.
I'll look into it. I got a couple of places.
Nice. Cool. Well, let's shift gears here just a little bit so that those people that are listening that aren't as interested in the drama that goes on with CrossFit and the CrossFit
How could you not?
HQ. I don't know how you could not, you know, but I know that I do have a few friends that listen to the podcast that are not actual CrossFit athletes. They're just trying to get better at life. So,
also good. Also good.
yeah, it's good stuff. So just a few more minutes here and we'll push you off for the day. But quick question, how do you prepare? And this is like a two-part question that I think most people can benefit from is like, how do you, if you walk into the gym and there's a workout on the board, how do you prepare for that workout? Number one, if you're an athlete, and number two, if you're a coach. So first is like, you know, you walk in, there's Fran on the board, or there's like, you know, you're going to work up to 1 rep max back squat, and then you're going to do Fran. And if you're an athlete, what are you thinking? And then if you're a coach and you're going to coach that class, what are you thinking?
Yeah. So I think for me, the biggest thing, I think a lot of it I can contribute to just a lot of the time I spent with you and at Stoneway CrossFit is the mental aspect of preparing for workouts for me has definitely changed and evolved over the past year or so. Normally it would be like, let's look at the workout. Oh God, that's going to suck. I'm just gonna close my eyes and go.
Yep.
But it's definitely, for me, it's evolved into, okay, I'll look at what movements are on the board. I'll think about what of those movements I'm good at. But mainly the biggest highlight for me is always identifying the sticking point in the workout for me. And I define that as what's going to be the hardest component of that, whether it's a couple rounds for time, what part of that round is am I going to be the slowest at? Or if it's a chipper, what exercise am I definitely going to slow down at because I'm not that great at it? Or at what point, if it looks like a lot of death, I'll try to figure out where am I going to breathe. You know?
Yeah.
And so a couple of those components, like I said. So I look at what am I good at, what's going to be the sticking point, and where am I able to breathe.
Okay.
I think those have been the biggest things for me. And then if it's, for example, if I saw Fran on the board, I know that I can knock out my chest to bar butterflies. I can knock those out easily. I can just easily split them up into 2 or 3 sets at most, depending on how I felt after the thrusters. But I always know that the thrusters are going to be the hardest part for me because they just feel, I hate thrusters. And so when I look at that, I know what area I'm good at. I know what part I need to, if I, for example, on a 21:15.9, for those thrusters, I'd make sure I split those up into no more than 2 sets, if at all. And so for the thrusters, I would make sure I stuck with that. That's the hardest part, is making sure, like, even if the thrusters feel good and like my pre-workout's kicking in and my nutrition's feeling great, I'm like, oh, I hit the first 10, 11 thrusters feeling fantastic, I would still be strict with myself to make sure I hit that break. And that I drop it, take a couple breaths, and then go right back to it. I think it's always more important for me to stick with a game plan if it's an exercise I know that I hate, because even if it feels great, I'll stick through it, and all of a sudden I'll hit that lactate threshold that we all know about, and I won't be able to keep going at all. And then, like I said, the biggest thing is just looking at where am I able to breathe. So for thrusters, it's always at the top. Always at the top. As soon as I have that barbell overhead, take that big breath in before I start coming back down into that front squat, because I'm sure we've all tried to breathe like at the bottom of a front squat. It's not convenient at all, but we still try it.
It doesn't work well.
Let me just put 95 pounds on my chest and then try to breathe in. That sounds smart.
It's good. Good idea.
So that's how I would address it as an athlete. And then I think as a coach, the biggest thing I'm looking for is, all right, looking at these movements, what are the most significant joints and muscle groups that I need to be activated and warmed up for these athletes to make sure that they don't run into any mobility issues, they don't run into any cramping issues. And then not only just looking at what needs to be warmed up properly, so kind of planning a warm up directly around those target points, but also looking at who is in the class in terms of how can we scale accordingly.
Right.
I've always told you that I'm huge on scaling the scaling certificate course that CrossFit has online. One of the best resources I've ever used. So if any of our listeners are interested in that, one of the 6 or 7 online certifications CrossFit offers is specifically on scaling movements for athletes, scaling workouts for athletes. And so I would look at, depending on who's in the class, do we need to scale volume? So meaning we go heavier or we go lighter on the thrusters, or do we need to scale movement standards? So if we have some folks that can't squat below parallel yet, or they can't do a full strict pull-up yet, who's going to need to do those pull-ups with a band, who's going to need to do jumping pull-ups, and always trying to scale the workout accordingly so that it's still very difficult, but they're able to do it.
Right.
My favorite thing, and I've told you this time and time again, but when workouts are scaled properly, and this is like always like the green light for me, when you scale workouts properly for a diverse class, everyone finishes around the exact same time.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah. Yep. Me too. And it can be hard to get people's mind wrapped around that. I think that becomes a technique in and of itself as far as a coach, to convince people that they're going to get a better workout if they do it faster and scale a little bit than if they go heavy and they're, lasting, during their Fran in 15 minutes.
Exactly.
When it should be, somewhere around I don't even know,
it's supposed to be a
5-minute
sprint
workout or something
it's
like that.
supposed to be a sprint like that. Yeah, that's the other thing. Is like you got to also just have that kind of awareness as a coach, like how long is this workout supposed to take?
Right.
And so I think one of the biggest things, I don't remember if it was you that had actually told me this, but I've also started looking at workouts according to like how many total repetitions are there. So normally, at least from what I've seen, depending on if they're quick movements, anything from 100 to 150 reps is usually a sprint. Anything less than that, the workout is less than 10 minutes for sure. Anything in the 200 to 300, 400 rep range, is going to be a long 15 to 20 minute burner. So I'm always looking at that too. So if it's taken us 20 minutes to do about 100 repetitions of work, the weight is way too heavy. We did not scale accordingly.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, unless it's some sort of crazy workout that, it's designed to put people into a place like that, which every once in a while is interesting.
Every once in a while.
Yeah. Like for example, there was a Misfit Athletics workout recently that was body weight. It was 10 rounds of 15 reps at body weight bench press, and then you ran 100. Then I think you ran either 100 or 200 meters, and then you came back in and you did 15 strict pull-ups.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Right? So it's like, even
those are slow movements. You have to think about.
You're just never going to be able to do 10 rounds of that unbroken.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's not designed to be done unbroken like that. So you're going to have to just figure out how to do strict movements and efficiently slog through them.
Yeah. But I think it was like last week I was coaching a couple classes in the morning, and the workout was something nice and simple. It was like 5 rounds for time, 15 thrusters, 15 bar facing burpees. So it's like it's just an easy couplet. But then I was also very aware looking at that. I was like, okay, so we got 15 of the thrusters, 15 of the burpees over the bar. That's 30 reps. 30 reps times 5 rounds. You got 50 reps there.
Yep.
But thrusters and burpees are slow movements.
Yep.
They're very, very taxing movements. You're going to want to take a couple breaks. When you're doing those burpees, people are going to want to rest on the floor.
Yeah.
So a lot of our athletes are like, this workout's going to take us 30 minutes. Why are you torturing us? And I was like, realistically, we've only got 150 reps here, everyone. I'm going to put a 15-minute time cap on this, and you all are still going to finish. And the last athlete, I think, finished at like 12.
Okay. Nice.
And so, like, one of those things was like, yes, it's still a little bit slower, but when you really think about how many repetitions of work are you actually doing,
Mm-hmm.
it's a good little rule of thumb, at least that I've fallen into, to figure out, if I've never done this workout before, how long will it probably take?
I like it. Yeah. Good stuff, Joe. Definitely good stuff. So I don't want to take any more of your day. I know that we've been on the call here for almost an hour, which is awesome. Good to catch up with you. Anything else that you want to leave people with or have them check out that you're doing?
Definitely, if there are any CrossFit coaches out there listening, I would say check out all of the online certifications that CrossFit does. I think that they're constantly adding new courses to that. I know sometimes people might fear away from online certifications versus in-person certifications, but a lot of the content that CrossFit's been putting up on there is actually super, super, super helpful. But not only that, is like the online content, once you have access to it and once you complete the course, you have lifelong access to that info and those modules.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really, really cool. I actually stumbled upon a new one last night on the pose method for running.
Yep.
They have an intro course on that now through CrossFit on how to analyze your athletes, their running form, their cadence, and their gait. Really, really cool thing. So a lot of it is just like, it's a very, very practical. I think the course took me about like an hour and a half online, but it was definitely like a great intro for those of us that like hate to run, whether you're an athlete or a coach. They have just so much awesome stuff on there. So definitely go ahead and check it out. Online CrossFit certifications. I think it's actually just oc.crossfit.com.
Okay. Yeah. And I'll make sure and, look that up and put it in the show notes at allaroundjoe.com/112. And we'll get all those things that we've referenced today on that page if you want to go and check them out. But that's cool. Just, I've used pose running as well. So
yeah, it's great. I learned all about it last night.
Nice. Good.
For the first time.
It's good stuff. Well, thanks, Joe. I appreciate your time as always. And
always.
Thanks for catching up with us.
Of course. If you need anything from me, you know where I'm at. If anyone's interested into what I'm up to, I actually have a new site up. It's joeward.me.
Oh, yeah.
That's it. Everything is on there. If you're looking at what I'm doing, again, CrossFit trainer and portrait photographer here in Northern California.
Everybody check out joeward.me. I love it.
Nice and easy, right?
Cool. All right, Joe. Well, we will talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Have a good one.